یہ خالق کے ولی کا دودھ ان کی رگوں میں ہے بھرا بنت علی کا، دودھ ان کی رگوں میں ہے بھرا بنت علی کا، یہ کہہ کے انہیں لائیں حضور شہ زیجا کی عرض کے حاضر ہیں غلام آپ کے یا شاہ، حسرت ہے کہ حضرت سے ملے رخصت جنگا، مرنے پہ کمر باندھ کے آئے ہیں میرے ماں، منظور ہے ان کو یہ شریک شہداء ہوں، آدھا سے لڑے اکبر و اصغر پہ فدا ہوں، آدھا سے لڑے اکبر و اصغر پہ فدا ہوں، منہ دیکھ کے زینب کا یہ کہنے لگے شبیر، تلواروں میں ان بچوں کو میں بھیج دوں ہمشیر، کی دست ادب جوڑ کے دونوں نے یہ تقریر، ہم آپ کے اقبال سے ہیں صاحب شمشیر، بچے ہیں یہ ہم سا کوئی جرار نہیں ہے، تلواروں میں جانا ہمیں دشوار نہیں ہے، تلواروں میں جانا ہمیں دشوار نہیں ہے، ناروں سے دلیروں کی پڑی فوج میں ہلچل، جنبش ہوئی گیتی کو لرزنے لگے جنگل، بھاگے ادھر سوار ادھر چھپ گئے پیدل، اول صفے آخر ہوئی آخر صفے اول، مجمع تہو بالا سرے میدان نظر آیا، لشکر کے الٹ جانے کا سامان نظر آیا، لشکر کے الٹ جانے کا سامان نظر آیا، کہتا تھا بڑے بھائی سے چھوٹا بس دادا، بھائی میں بھگا دوں گا ابھی ان کو جو ملے آگ، اب پیاس کی گرمی کے کلیجے کو نہیں تھا، سینے میں میرے دل نہیں آتش ہے یہ سیما، ہم لوگ مہک کیا نہیں اس آب رواں کے، تالو میں خلش ہوتی ہے کانٹوں سے زباں کے، تالو میں خلش ہوتی ہے کانٹوں سے زباں کے، یہ ذکر ابھی تھا کہ ستمگار پکارے، لو شاہ کی ہمشیر کے فرزند سدھارے، ٹکڑے کیا معصوموں کو تلواروں کے مارے، وہ لوٹتے تھے خاک پہ دو عرش کے تارے، پامالی کی لاشوں کی اب اسوار بڑھے ہیں، بچوں کے سرب کٹ کے سنانوں پہ چڑھے ہیں، بچوں کے سرب کٹ کے سنانوں پہ چڑھے ہیں، یہ سنتے ہی بس پہلو میں سنبھلا نہ دل زار، اور شاہ کی ہمشیر گری خاک پہ اخبار، وہاں لاشوں پہ روتے ہوئے پہنچے شہ ابرار، مہماں کوئی ساتھ کے ہیں وہ جگر و اخبار، کس عمر میں ہستی کا چمن چھوڑ رہے تھے، گودی کے گلے خاک پہ دم توڑ رہے تھے، گودی کے پلے خاک پہ دم توڑ رہے تھے، ہے شور کے زینب کے پسر، سلام
براشدی امام زمانہ لائف صلوات नारे हैदरी नारे हैदरी फातिहा
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم صلى الله عليك يا سيدي يا مولاي يا أبا عبد الله صلى الله عليك وعلى أهل بيتك الطيبين الطاهرين وأنصارك الغر الميامين يا ليتنا كنا معكم سيدي فنفوز فوزا عظيما اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات أولئك هم خير البرية. Respected Muslim brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. When discussing the tragedy of Muharram, the 10th of Muharram, the tragedy of Ashura, and the tragedy of Abu Abdullah Hussein alayhi salam, the topics will range from historical to spiritual, but occasionally they need to become polemical. Before I continue, the word polemical, it refers to any topic having to do with debate or back and forth. And so when it comes to the 10th of Muharram, every year, I try to dedicate at least one night to refuting a polemical issue. Because as we know, many Muslims, we grow up, we hear about certain shubhas. And sometimes what we do is instead of discussing them, instead of asking about them, what we will do is we will internalize them. And this will probably create doubts for us, will create issues for us. It will make certain things difficult to understand. So for example, many of us when we were younger, when we look at the biography of Imam Sahib al-Asr al-Zaman, we may find certain key details of his life confusing. Why has he lived for so long? Why the need for Layla? Correct? And we discussed this issue in the previous night. But for many of us when we're younger, we don't hear about this. Every year we go to our majalis, our lectures, we hear the same story of Abu Fadl Abbas, we may hear the story of Zuhayr, the story of Al-Hur, the story of Al-Akbar, of Al-Qasim. But when it comes to certain aqidah issues, many of us will have certain questions, but they don't get covered in favor of telling the same story over and over. Correct? There is nothing wrong with repeating the tragedy of Abu Abdullah Hussein, but there is a need to enhance our perception and understanding of it every single. Most of you would agree. When it comes to the polemical aspects of it, for example, one of the issues that we hear about every year is the issue of fasting on the 10th of Muharram. This one comes up every single year, and I noted this a few nights back. You notice the big social media buzz becomes about the favors of fasting on the 10th of Muharram. It's become quite big. I remember a few years ago, one of the brothers told me that they're passing out flyers and you see ads online and YouTube and what's the new one? I think it's TikTok. Yeah. Right. And we'll see. In any case, the polemic that I would like to discuss, very important to our aqidah, is the issue of questions. One of the questions, for example, I heard someone ask me, one of the brothers from another brother, they're getting rather creative with these. You said, Imam Hussein salam, when we analyze his life, when we analyze the events leading up to the tragedy of Muharram, there's a very, very big theme. And that is the theme of betrayal versus loyalty. What do I mean? All of you have heard the story of Sayyidina Muslim ibn Aqil, salam, correct? Muslim ibn Aqil, if you've ever heard the story or if maybe you've seen it on a TV show or a movie, there's always a scene where Muslim ibn Aqil, he asks Ahlul Kufa to give him bay'ah for Abu Abdullah Hussein. How many people give him bay'ah? thousands of people, correct? Then the Muharram, how many people showed up? 70. 70 companions of Imam Hussein, not counting his own relatives. The 17 Hashemites, and then there's one more, Abdullah al-Rabi', the youngest one, and then Imam Hussein himself. What on earth happened? How could this happen? How could thousands of people give the grandson of Rasulullah bay'ah and then none of them are to be seen? This has led some people to say, you see, look, the Shia, they betrayed their Imam. They called him to come to Iraq, they called him to come to Kufa, and then when he came, what did they do? They betrayed him. Has anyone ever wondered how this came to be, how this happened? Tonight, inshallah, what I wish to do is I wish to examine this question and I wish to dissect it bit by bit. The first thing we're going to go over, what does the term Shia mean? The term Shia is mentioned many times in the Quran. It is the name of our madhab, the madhab of the Ahlul Bayt. Correct? What does this word mean? How was it used in the past? Was it ever used by the Prophet ﷺ? Did the meaning of it change over time, for example? Then I'm going to show you some examples. When we look at the betrayal of Abu Abdullah, and were there some people who betrayed him? Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm going to give you some examples. Right? Then I'm going to give you some examples of people who were loyal to Abu Abdullah from the beginning until the very end. Right? In order that we commemorate his tragedy as well as the tragedy of his Ansar in the history of the world. Even the companions of Rasulullah, the companions of Rasulullah, there were certain battles where Rasulullah, many of them, they thought he was killed, they fled. And a small unit of them banded closely around the Prophet. But the companions of Imam Hussein, when that battle began, the vast majority of them stayed and they fought, correct? And the reason behind this, one of them will explain, correct? In any case, let us begin by defining the term Shia. What does the term Shia mean? The term Shia comes up in the Quran a few times, right? One of the most famous examples, Allah says in the Quran, and among the Shia was Ibrahim. It's a reference to Nabi Allah Nuh. Among the Shia, Nabi Allah Nuh was who? Was Ibrahim, right? Another example is in the story of Nabi Musa. When Nabi Musa sees that one of Pharaoh's soldiers attacking one of Bani Israel, how does the Quran describe this man? It says, a man from Nabi Musa Shia called out to him, asking for help. Correct? And probably the most infamous example of the term Shia being used in the Quran, I believe it's in Surah Al-Ankabut or Surah Al-Rum, is that the verse, it says, and there are those who divided the religion and became one. Shia. Correct? So what exactly does this word mean? Is it negative connotation, positive connotation, or is it neutral? The word Shia means the supporters or the party of, correct? So the most famous use of the word Shia, Shi'at Ali, what does that mean? The supporters of or the party of Ali, alayhi salam. The word Shia in the Quran is used in this way. Those who belong to a certain group, a certain party. Sometimes it is negative, such as those who divide the religion, and sometimes it is positive in the case of Nabi Ibrahim, correct? This term, the Shia, when we look at it, we look at its use historically. There are those who will tell you, this is actually very interesting, you see that many great scholars, university professors and academics and Orientalists, they'll say, the Shia, this group of people, their aqidah only developed after the death of Imam Hussein. In the beginning, it was just a political group. Later, they started adding a hadith, and then they had tafsir, and now they have their own aqidah. This group developed later. Is this true? You said, no, absolutely not. Absolutely not true. For example, yesterday, when we narrated the narration of Sayyidina Humayd ibn Ziyad, his narration from Amir al-Mu'mineen, was this before or after the death of Imam Hussein? It was before, correct? Before the death of Imam Hussein, you see Amir al-Mu'mineen teaching Humayd ibn Ziyad the foundations of the aqidah that would become the aqidah of the group, the Shia, correct? But even better than that, there are examples we can point to in the life of the Prophet ﷺ where he refers to the Shia of Ali. I'll give you some sources. The ayah of the Quran, which we began this lecture with, is Surah Al-Bayyinah, ayah 7. Surah Al-Bayyinah, ayah 7, what does it say? Those who believe and do righteous deeds, أُولَٰئِكَ هُمْ خَيْرُ الْبَرِيَّةِ. They are the best of creations. There are narrations, one of them is in Tafsir al-Tabari, which is not a Shia tafsir. Another one is in Tafsir al-Durr al-Manthur. And whoever wants, you can go back to any of our books of Tafsir, will say the same thing. It'll narrate this report from Imam al-Baqir salamullah alayhi. They asked them, say, let's have another loud salam. ثالثا بأعلى أصواتك. Third time. اللهم صل على محمد. Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam was asked, they said, Ya Rasulullah, what does this verse mean? This verse, can you tell us about it? So Rasulullah narrated to Imam al-Baqir narrated to them, he says, Amir al-Mu'mineen was once reciting this verse. And so when he reached this ayah, Rasulullah put his hand on him, he touched him, he patted him. He said, Ali khayrul bariyah on Yawm al-Qiyamah will be you and your Shia. The best of creation on Yawm al-Qiyamah will be who? You and your Shia. Correct? Imam al-Baqir salamullah alayhi is highlighting that even during the time of Rasulullah, this term Shia, did it exist? Yes, it existed. It is not an innovated sect. Correct? And it's even narrated, I believe this is in Suyuti's Durr al-Manthur, he says, Ibn Mas'ud, who's a Sahabi, he says, whenever Ali ibn Abi Talib used to walk by, the Sahaba used to look at him and say, Ja'a khayrul bariyah, the best of creation has come. Correct? So this term, we are the Shia of the Ahlul Bayt of the Prophet, and their rallying cry was what? Ya Risa'at al-Hussein. Their rallying cry was what? Vengeance for al-Hussein. But when they came to our, what ended up happening? You see that among the descendants of Rasulullah is poison. Another one is locked in the dungeon. Correct? Another one is killed on the battlefield. Another one is beheaded. It reached the point where one of our poets, Abu Firas al-Hamdani, the cousin of the famous Shia Amir Sayyid al-Dawla al-Hamdani, in one of his poems, you know what he says? He says, Ya layta jur bani Marwan damanana, wa adlu bani al-Abbas fil nari. He says, I wish we could have the oppression of Banu Umayyah back over the so-called justice of Banu al-Abbas. That's how horrible Banu al-Abbas were. Banu al-Abbas, at the beginning of their mission, who did they claim to be? They claimed to be Shia. Does that mean everyone who claims to be Shia is actually a Shia of Amir al-Mu'mineen? Not at all. Not at all. The Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam gave us conditions. One of these conditions, very important, ziyarah of Abu Abdullah Hussein. That's one of the defining characteristics of someone who's a true Shia or someone who just claims to be Shia. Another one, for example, you would hear about is wearing the rings on the left hand, or the right hand, sorry. Correct? There are other characteristics, for example. They never miss salah, they don't do either. And there are many hadith regarding this issue. Correct? But the basic point, not everyone who claims I am a supporter of Ali is in fact a supporter of Ali. Would you agree? I'll give you another example. There was a man, many of you may have heard of this man. There's a man, Al-Ash'ath ibn Qais, ring any bells? Al-Ash'ath ibn Qais was one of the very powerful men in the pre-Islamic period. He was the chief of Banu Kinda, correct? And he was a Sahabi. He met the Prophet towards the end of the Prophet's life. After the Prophet died, he participated in the conquest movement, and he later became one of the commanders in Ali's army. Very, very famous for what he did at the Battle of Siffin. At the Battle of Siffin, when Muawiyah's men put the Quran on spears, what did this man do? He says, Ali, we have to make peace with our Muslim brothers. If you don't make peace with Muawiyah, me and the rest of the army will rebel against you, and we will kill you. This man, is this one of the Shia of Ali? Sure, he claimed to be. He was a commander in his army. Right? I'll give you another example. Shimr ibn al-Jawshan, Baha'u'llah. Shimr is, according to some reports, the man who he himself beheaded Abu Abdullah. Shimr ibn al-Jawshan was one of the supporters of Ali in the Battle of Siffin, and he was struck during the battle. He was physically struck during the war with Muawiyah's men. This man, this is how he was one day, what happened to him the next day? He flipped. This takes me back to a very important point. There's a scholar by the name of Shah Waliullah Dehli. He's a famous scholar from the subcontinent. Me and some of the brothers who do research into these issues, we've given him the nickname the Ibn Taymiyyah of the East. He was famous for writing a book called Tuhfa ibn Ashari, which translates roughly into My Gift to the Twelvers. So the man had a sense of humor. In this book, what he tries to do is he tries to refute the aqidah of the Twelver Shia point by point. But subhanAllah, I noticed something very interesting. If you actually go and read this book, there's a lot of material in it that actually helps our point of view, or it helps our argument. One of the things he says when he talks about the Shia, he says the sect of the Shia is the first sect in Islam. So the first sect in Islam, how do you prove this? He says when this sect came into existence, after the death of the third ruler, after the death of Uthman ibn Affan, a group of people came and gave bay'ah to Ali, and a group of people decided not to give bay'ah to Ali. The group of people who gave him bay'ah became the what? The Shia. And so then what does he say? He says, we, the Ahl Sunnah, are the true Shia of Ali. Right? Another scholar says something similar. Ibn Hajar Asqalani and al-Dhahabi echo the same thing. They say in the early period of Islam, this term Shia does not mean people who believe in 12 Imams, nor does it mean people who believe in Isma, nor does it mean people who believe Ali was the first. On the contrary, Shia of Ali at that time just meant someone who supported Ali over Muawiyah. That's it. If you sided with Ali over Muawiyah, even if you did not believe Ali was the best, even if you did not believe Ali was Masoom, even if you did not believe the Aqidah of the Shia of Masoom Imams, one after the other, you are considered Shia, just a political term. Correct? Later, this term becomes specific to who? The sect that we are known as, the Imami school of thought. Correct? Some people, when they ask what sect are we, some people will tell them we are 12ers. Some people will tell them we are Ja'far. Both of these names are actually incorrect. I'll tell you why. When you say I am a Ja'fari, you know what that means? It means my fiqh comes from Ja'far ibn Muhammad. Right? Imam Sadiq is one of our imams, but is that where our fiqh comes from? Did he come up with our fiqh? So, our fiqh came from Amir al-Mu'mineen and came from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. When it comes to, for example, the name 12er, and this is very, very important, if someone was one of the Shia of Amir al-Mu'mineen, someone, for example, like Zurar ibn Ayn, Hisham ibn Hakam, Abu Hamza al-Thumani, Khumayl ibn Ziyad, did these people believe in 12 imams? Many of them did not know that the final number would be 12. The traditional name for our madhab is either Shi'at Ali or Imami. These names came later. For example, the term Ja'fari, if those of you are interested in history, go back and read. It was Nader Shah, who was one of the rulers of Iran. He came up with this title because he wanted to convince the rest of the Islamic world. He says, look, we're a sect just like the rest of you. Right? But in any case, when it comes to the term Shia of Ali, let's go through a few flashpoints in history and see if things make a little more sense. Ali salamullah alayhi at the Battle of Siffin was winning the battle. I'm not going to go over the entire battle with you. But at a certain point, it became painfully clear that Ali was going to win. And there are some narrations that say Malik al-Ashtar was so close to Muawiyah. All he had to do was order one final charge and Muawiyah would have been finished. What happened? Muawiyah had his men raise the Quran up on spears. Remember yesterday when we discussed the issue of respecting the Quran and the sanctity of the Quran? So this is one of the first times it was violated in Islamic history. When Amir al-Mu'mineen saw this, he told his men, this is a trick. Fight them, finish them. Do not allow them to deceive you. Do not allow them to snatch victory from you when you've come so close. Many of Imam Ali's men, what did they say? They said, oh, these are our Muslim brothers, we must stop fighting. We've already shed enough blood. A minority of Amir al-Mu'mineen's men, they said, no, Amir al-Mu'mineen wants to finish the fight. Let's continue fighting. But the vast majority wanted what? They wanted arbitration. Right? A few years later, Imam al-Hasan al-Mujtaba, sallallahu alayhi, he becomes the Khalifa, the people give him bay'ah. He gets on the member of Kufa and he gives a khutbah to them. He says, oh people, Muawiyah is calling us to a matter that there is neither sharaf or karama in it. Sharaf is honor, karama, dignity. There is no honor and dignity in submitting to a man like Muawiyah. If you're willing, we will fight him. But if you don't have the stomach to fight, then I will make peace. So the people, what do they say? They said to him, Al-Baqiyya ya Rasulullah. He said, please, we're so sick of fighting. We're so sick of all the civil war. SubhanAllah, what ended up happening to the people of Iraq when Bani Umayyah came to power? Correct? We see the vast majority of the followers of Imam al-Hasan, sallallahu alayhi, what do they want? The people who claim to be his Shia say, no, we don't want to fight. But a small minority of them who believed he was Ma'soom, Muftarad al-Ta'a, the Imam, the successor of Amir al-Mu'mineen, they say, we will do whatever the Imam commands. Correct? Let's flash forward again. 10 years later, or not 10 years later, 20 years later, after Imam al-Hassan salam died 10 years after the peace treaty, and then Hussein salam 10 years after that, he lived 10 years with Muawiyah. Imam al-Hussein salam the entire time for his 10-year imamah, the people of Kufa were writing him letters. They said, Rasulullah, Muawiyah, your brother al-Hassan, maybe he didn't want to fight, but we know you are a great leader. You are willing to fight. Come to Iraq, let us fight. Imam al-Hussein says, no, I have a peace treaty in effect. My brother signed a peace treaty, and not all the terms of that treaty have been broken. When Muawiyah died and had made his son Yazid the crown prince, again they wrote him letters saying, Rasulullah, come to us, we're ready, we're waiting, our weapons are waiting for you, we are all loyal, we are all at your service. All of them begging Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam to come. Correct? Imam al-Hussein salam, you claim you're ready? He sends them Muslim Naqi. What do they do with Muslim Naqi? One day they give him bay'ah. A few days later, he's surrounded in the house of Qur'an, and he's taken prisoner. You read the Maqtal of Muslim Naqi, the way he is thrown from the roof. Before he is thrown, he calls out, Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah. And Aba Abdullah heard this. He responded, Wa alayka assalamu ya Muslim. These same people, thousands of them wrote to the Imam, telling him, we're begging to come here, we are your Shia. Correct? How many of them did we say showed up? 7. Correct? But now you understand this term back then means something different than it means now. Back then, the term Shia, what does it mean? Someone who politically favored the family of the Prophet over Bani Umayyah. That's why there's a very painful anecdote from history. And this one is located, you'll find in Tarikh al-Tabari, and Kitab al-Irshad. You will find this in all the primary sources regarding the story of Imam Hussein. When Hani ibn Urwa, he was one of those few loyal supporters of the Imam in Kufa, when he was brought into the palace of Ibn Ziyad says something terrifying to him. What does he tell him? He says to him, Hani, my father, Ziyad ibn Abi, who's Ubaydullah's father, the governor of Kufa and Basra for Muawiyah, he says, my father, when he was ruler of Iraq, he wiped out every last one of you Shia. Every single one. Except for your father. Because my dad and your dad were friends. But my dad wiped them all out. There was only a few of them who really caused us a problem. And he mentions Hijr ibn Adi. Hijr ibn Adi was a companion of Amir al-Mu'minin who created a massive headache for Bani Umayyah in Kufa. Ibn Ziyad, what is he telling Hani? He says, Hani, you see all these people who have given bay'ah to your Imam, who have given bay'ah to Muslim Aqid, none of them are really Shia. We already killed them all. You really think your little uprising is going to work? You really think there's enough of you to take on Bani Umayyah and our allies? Correct. When we look at the people who wrote letters to Imam Hussein, a few names come up. There's a few names that are highlighted in the books of history. One of them, 4 people from among the elders of the Shia of Kufa wrote letters to Imam Hussein. One of them, Sulaiman bin Suwaid al-Khuzai, and Musayyab bin Najaba, and Rifa' bin Shaddad, and he was from Bani Fazal. I don't remember what tribe he was from. These 3 people, and then there was one more, Habib ibn Mu'adh. How many of these people showed up to Karbala? Just one. Just Habib. Sulaiman bin Suwaid, and this is the irony of it all. People tell you, see, look, the Shia wrote to Hussein, and then they betrayed Hussein. They showed up.